Hello, friend, and welcome back to True to Ourselves, the show where we are working to trust ourselves, feel good within ourselves, and feel true to ourselves, be true to ourselves. I'm Kay, and I think of myself as the original guinea pig here for this because uh, it was interesting and challenging for me to learn how to feel true to myself, especially when in 2022 I was diagnosed with ADHD. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So I'm really glad you're here. I'm hoping to have so, some inspiration maybe for you, some comfort for you on your journey if you are discovering this about yourself. If you're watching for a loved one, that also is great. And I think it is possible to be happy when you have ADHD. And we're going to talk a little bit about how today. And yeah, I'm glad you're here. So yeah, I'll introduce myself. I am Kay. I am a coach. I am a creator. I've written an award-winning memoir, and I'm a creator of art that has also won some awards, which is really lovely. And I'm someone who didn't used to believe in myself at all in either of these ways, like that I could be a writer, that I could be a creator. Um, it turns out that I can, and so can you. If or whatever creative endeavor you're working to do, you can do it too. And honestly, I think that having ADHD has been good for me in terms of creating, in terms of writing, and like what was really messing with me was the words deficit and disorder. That feels like a real judgment. When you're told you have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, that is fucked up. That can make you feel really bad about yourself. And it certainly did that for me. So how I was diagnosed as an adult too. So I only found out in 2022 that I had it. In fact, if I'm remembering correctly, the official diagnosis was not until 2023, because I just couldn't bear to look at it. But I knew I had it from, um, so to start this story in its proper place, I have a young one of my kids, when he turned 18, which was that year, he decided that he wanted to determine for himself if he had ADHD. And so he went to the doctor and turned out, sure enough, he did. And it's funny because I was like, we homeschooled. And one of the reasons was because I had been a teacher. Like I have a master's degree in early childhood education and a bachelor's in human development. And all I could picture was this little boy going off to kindergarten and being told constantly to sit down and shut up. And we were so fortunate to be able to homeschool and have that not be what happened for him. Instead, he's grown up quite happy with himself and um, a contributing member of society and a person who's not, how can I say this? He's been really inspiring to me because he doesn't have the same stories in here that I received in school as a student about, for example, there's only one way to do this, and it's not your way, Kay, it's my way. So he didn't really have a lot of those messages. I think things do filter through, and I'm not saying he's like um, figured it all out. He's on a journey though where he's I think he's in a better place for himself than I was he's now 21. So when I was 21, and I really admire that. And anyway, here he was at 18, deciding that he wanted to discover if he had ADHD, discovered that he did. Um, and that seemed, I would say this, I think it messed me up more than it messed him up because it's like a degree closer now of um, somewhere in the back of my mind, I was like, I wonder where he got that from. And I had, as an educator, I worked with parents all the time to support their littles with ADHD and other neurodivergences, right? Like not just ADHD, but autism um, and pervasive developmental disorders, like a lot all along the spectrum of both of these, ADD, ADHD, etc. And anyway, so here's my kid, he has ADHD, it's confirmed. And I have a very dear friend who is a licensed mental health counselor and someone who um, does a great job helping and supporting people, particularly young people, on what, their own mental health. And also, a lot of times into that comes ADHD. And so she recommended that I watch a documentary called The Disruptors. And she said, I think you'll get a lot out of it watching it in support of your child. She said, I will caution you though, a lot of times for parents, it's really hard to watch because we see these parents in the documentary doing what they think they need to do or should be doing for their child. It's really hard. Sometimes it's just really hard to watch. She said, so just know that. And I watched it like that night. And it was so interesting because that I understood that and my heart went out to those parents, but that was not what wrecked me about the disruptors. What wrecked me about it is I saw my own life playing out on this screen, especially as a girl and a woman with ADHD. Um, I used to chew my hair all the time. And I would get in such trouble for that. I was such a fidgety kid. I would go out into the woods and I would come back completely muddy. And my mother I was the despair of my mother. And at the same time, she loved me and she wanted me to be able to go and play in the woods. And, um, she didn't, she did her best, in raising me. She just was also like, oh my God, like, can I, just have a clean kid that doesn't track mud through the house once? And that was never me, basically. I was always that one who, was wandering off for hours by myself, um, out in nature. And um, you see in the Disruptors documentary, what you see are humans, whether they're grown-ups or kids, um, with a particular operating system. And in the case of those with ADHD, their operating system isn't one that our society supports or tolerates very well. And you see their parents trying to understand, but also trying to get them to like do their homework and stay in school and stuff like that. And the other thing that I loved about this documentary is it featured like well-known people doing across a range of creative and just interesting professions and people of all different ages. One of the primary folks that you hear from is oh my goodness, his name is Ned. He's a doctor. It's funny, I'm not remembering his whole name at this moment, but he's a doctor who has himself ADHD. He does things right now called Ned Talks, which I think such a great, his whole practice is around supporting people with ADHD. He's got it himself, and he talks about how people with ADHD are very curious, very energetic, very creative. That focus yes, it can make it so that people who want your focus to be where they want it to be, they're not having a lot of luck, but our focus being where we want it to be is something that we can really do. And um, so there were good things that happened in this movie too that gave me heart. But I do remember finishing it and feeling like, okay, well, not only does my son have this, but oh, good golly, do I have it? Um, and I remember one of the first things that I did when I finished watching it was I went and literally crawled into my husband's lap. He's been my husband as of now for 28 years. At that time, I believe it was 26 years, I think it was. And I said to him from his lap, I said, I just wish I could have been normal for you. And I was crying. And he said, I love you. He said, I wouldn't want you if you were normal. What is normal anyway? Like, I love you. I want you. And I, it was really lovely to feel that support. At the same time, it still messed with me. Like I was still not happy. And, I felt like it was because of this ADHD. I was so overwhelmed and fearful about what it meant and did it change who I was? And I can remember very specifically, I love to dance. And in recent years, I've given myself permission to just like put on, I have a Spotify playlist that I called Magic Dance Party, and I just dance. I dance my ass off, and I have so much fun doing it. And when I first got this diagnosis, or when I first understood before I'd actually gotten the official diagnosis, I I I remember having this thought of like, oh, you have to dance because you have ADHD, like making fun of myself almost for my body's need for movement. Like, and and I was really not happy for a while. In fact, I was so upset about the words deficit and disorder that I took from I remember watching The Disruptors. I watched it again. I took notes on it. And then I decided, well, it needs a better name. And so I renamed it Creative Energetic Curiosity Syndrome because that just felt like a syndrome is just a collection of quote symptoms. So if the symptoms are creative, creativity, energy, and curiosity, I like that. That's cool. So, but even that was still me kind of reacting to it. Like I didn't like the name, so I made a better name, right? And what's happened in the time since, like in being able to just watch as the the emotions of it have sifted away. And again, I received a lot of support on this. I was in training at the time to do a solo hike across northern England, and my coach was someone who used to coach Olympic athletes, and so um, he really understood the things that hold people back, and he really understood how to support someone who wanted to do something, wasn't sure if they could do it, and then also what they encountered along the way, right, to make that to derail them, and then how would they get back on track. And I think he thought this was one of those things, like, right. Pardon me. Oh, okay, now we've encountered a place where Kay feels disempowered because she's discovered she's got ADHD. And so with all that support and just being able to share about it, my son who has ADHD was a huge support because he helped me normalize it. I think he helped me be like, oh, okay, he would share, for example, that he carried squirrel snacks with him everywhere because sometimes he would just forget to eat. And so like if he was somewhere not at home or somewhere where he didn't have access to he couldn't open the fridge and get some food, he at least had, I don't know, a bar or a something that he would be happy to eat. But that, he would really only eat in these kinds of like emergency situations where, he'd forgotten to eat. And like, oh, I love that. Instead of beating yourself up for forgetting to eat and feeling like the worst person in the world because you're not taking care of yourself and you're supposed to be taking care of yourself, which was a lot of the noise that I used to hear in here, I could just, if I was hungry, I could just, grab a bar. It's really okay. And and ultimately, between the supportive environment that I found myself in, with my kids, my husband, colleagues, coaching colleagues, and my coach who was supporting as I was getting ready to do this hike, and also doctors and my massage therapist and friends and people who were like, "Oh, I get it. I love you." I did start to feel better, and for me, being happy, even though I have ADHD, really means understanding that it's an operating system. Like it's one of a possible range of operating systems that human beings are come equipped with. Mine happens to be this one, and it means that I can give grace for myself and understand that when I am feeling okay inside, it's because I understand my default is this. Like some people's default is different than mine. And just because the wider culture doesn't really support um, having it doesn't really support an ADHD I don't know mindset. I mean, it's like a classified disorder in the diagnostics and statistics manual for psychologists. Like it's looked on as a disease. And when it is looked on like that, the people who have it feel diseased, first of all. That's been my experience. And second of all, People treat people with a quote disease differently than they treat someone that they think is just a normal person. Um, and I think I wish to say that that is not true of everyone. I think, um, so it like, I don't mean that as a stereotype. I mean it more as my observations in society. Um, and my own observations in here about how I felt about it, like the stereotypes that I had about it. And so, for example, one was that but it had to do with medication. Like, I know for myself, I've chosen, I'm like, once I found out I had it and I understood that it's just my operating system and I can choose to do things that help or or not, like, right? Like once I understood that, I can give myself grace on the challenges of this and lean into it because really, what a great operating system to be creative, curious, and energetic, right? Um, Once I could do all that, it was much, much easier to give myself grace and also to let other people have their opinions, all of which is part of feeling happy in life when you have ADHD. At least that's certainly been my experience. I've leaned into it in some ways that surprise me that I've given myself permission to do, and they've been really helpful. So, um, as we wrap up, I think well, first of all, I'm grateful that you're here and that you're listening and watching, and um, curious what your experience is. And I'd love for you to share in the comments. Ask questions if you've got them because people a lot of times have questions and I'll address them in a future video if you want that. If you're if you're watching for yourself because you're wondering, do I have ADHD? Or maybe you've just received a diagnosis of it, or if you're watching in support of someone else, I think those are both really great reasons to be here and to be open to the idea of like um, a range of possibilities in the human experience and even in ourselves. Um, Honestly, having ADHD has helped me bring about what I wanted to in my life once I figured out how to do it, right? Like, I used to try and make these big long lists. Some people, big long lists work really, really well, very detailed task lists. For me, that was an absolute mess. Honestly, I do not make lists anymore of what I'm going to do. What I do is I block time. I'm creating this video in a 2 hour block of time that is dedicated to creating stuff in enjoyment. Like that's literally that's what's blocked off in my calendar is creative enjoyment in solitude. And the like one other thing that I did during this block of time was I created a phone call to my neurologist. I suffer from migraines. I go to see a neurologist, and I wanted to confirm with them that I have an appointment to say yes, I will be at this appointment today. Um, like it doesn't mean I don't get things done. It doesn't mean I don't. I guess what I've discovered is that this is the best way for me to have my attention on what needs to be done in a joyful way. So we're moving house right now. There's a ton of stuff that needs to be done. And if I tried to make myself a great big list of it all, I would just end up on the floor in a ball of tears. So learning that I have this has meant learning that I can structure my time, my calendar, my the way that I approach tasks. Um, joyfully and in a way that works for me instead of trying to do it somebody else's way that like I get told to do it and it doesn't work, right? So um that's another way to be happy and with something like this. And yeah, I'm celebrating you for being here and opening to the possibility that there are other ways to do things besides like the conventional wisdom, and there are other ways to feel about a quote diagnosis like this besides bad. and um and I'm, you know, celebrating you for being here and maybe even opening to that idea for yourself or your loved one that has ADHD. Um Yeah, thanks for being here. Again, questions, if you've got them, I'd love to read them, and I'm happy to do another video in the future addressing specific questions or concerns about this. And I've just started a community in the school platform. It's called Dreamers and Doers. It is a place to um, really align your life with what is fulfilling for you. So I think of it as like if you want to lead a fulfilled life and you'd like some company along the way, you might really enjoy it. So the link is in the show notes. We'd love to see you over there. And in the meantime, I'm just wishing you really well. I hope you have a great day today. And we'll talk to you soon. Thanks for being here. Bye.